Hi, this is Johnny, your friendly local realtor. Welcome to the December 2021 monthly market report. So we finally reached the end of the year and getting close to Christmas, but looking at what's happening in the current housing market, it seems as though new home is on lots of people's Christmas list, because we're seeing lots of activity in the housing market right now. We're going to look into this today, as well as look deep into how rising interest rate will affect people's home buying decisions. So let's get started. Traditionally, we're supposed to be seeing the housing market slowing down in the winter season, but what's happening right now is completely opposite of that. We're seeing more activity now than ever this year, and according to the experts, we're going to see this trend continue throughout the winter. The traditional belief of listings coming into the market during spring has been completely thrown out the window. And this is what Jessica Lotz, VP of Demographics at NAR, said in regards to this. Home sellers have historically moved when something in their lives changed. A new baby, a marriage, a divorce, or a new job. The pandemic has impacted everyone, and for many, this became an impetus to sell and make a housing trade. And she continues by saying, the pandemic likely spurred occupants to shorten their home stay, as tenure in the home decreased to 8 years from 10 years, according to the report. This is the largest single-year change in home tenure since NAR began collecting such data. The pandemic affected all of us in a big way, and this spurred many people to make different real estate decisions. Now, traditionally, people were moving about every 5 to 6 years up until the 2008 housing crisis. And after 2008, their tenure in their homes began to rise. But what we're seeing now is that tenure coming down. And this is what that looks like graphically. If we go all the way back to 1985 to 2008, we can see that the average tenure was 6 years, but that changes right after the housing crisis. People start to stay in their homes longer, 9 to 10 years. And there's a good reason for this. When home prices fell drastically after the housing crisis, people didn't have enough equities to make the move, and seeing lots of people losing homes, they simply decided to stay and pay off their homes. But now, what we're seeing coming out of the pandemic is the tenure coming down. Of course, I'm not saying this 1 year is going to start a trend, but I believe this is the release of the pent-up demand for all those years of staying in their homes after the 2008 housing crisis. I mean, why not? Meaning of the homes have changed since the pandemic, and people have more equity in their homes than ever before. And I believe this is one of the reasons why we're going to be seeing very busy winter season for the housing market. And in support, this is what George Ratu from Realtor.com said. The pandemic has delayed plans for many Americans, and homeowners looking to move on to the next stage of life are no exception. Recent survey data suggests the majority of prospective sellers are actively preparing to enter the market this winter. Okay, so let's move on and talk in depth about interest rate. If you look at this graph by Freddie Mac, we were at high 3% right before the pandemic, but right now, we're sitting at 3.1%. Now, experts are projecting this rate to rise going into next year, but if you ask me where the rates are headed, I believe it will go back to where we were a few years ago. If you look at this historical perspective on mortgage rates going back to 2016, the 4 years from 2016 to 2019 is what I like to call a normal market, rates in the range between 3.5 to 5%. And I think we are eventually going to reach that range in the near future, which was more normal interest rate environment. We had some phenomenal rates for almost 2 years, but I believe it's going to head back to where we were prior to the pandemic. So continuing our discussions about interest rate, I would like to talk about what people are starting to question at the moment. It seems like most people are aware that the interest rates are going to rise soon, but they recently started asking different questions. They're asking whether rising interest rate would cause people not wanting to purchase homes anymore, and that would eventually lead to home price depreciation. So let's find an answer to that right now. First, this graph takes us back to 1989, and it represents how many homes were sold in the blue bar graph and mortgage rate changes in the line graph. And I'm not going to go into detail for each scenario, but generally, you can see that the rising interest rate, represented in the red line, really doesn't affect people's home buying decisions. The rising and falling of interest rates doesn't really correlate with the home sales. And this is what Mark Fleming says about home price appreciation relative to rising mortgage rates. House price appreciation is resistant to rising mortgage rates primarily because most home sellers would rather withdraw from the market than sell at lower prices, a phenomenon we refer to as downside sticky. So this means rising interest rates that we're going to see as we go into next year won't really affect the housing market dramatically. It's just going to cost more to buy a home, and you can expect this trend to continue as we move forward into years ahead. So this is all I'm going to cover today, and I hope I answered some of the questions you had about today's housing market. I hope you stay safe and sound during the holidays, and I'll see you again next year. Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Goodbye.